Joined right now by Melissa Hellman, reporter with the Seattle Times covering South King County. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So, as usual, I was reading the Times, which I do every day, and I came across your article here. It says killings by Seattle police grab attention, but far more happen in South King County suburbs. Tell us about it.
Sure. So, in a nutshell, this is a story about police killings that are happening in South King County, mostly because there's so much attention that's on Seattle. You quickly hear when there are police shootings that happen in bigger cities, but oftentimes the suburbs, which is what I cover, South King County, they're often ignored. So this article was an opportunity to shine a light on some of the people who were killed by police, and also just taking a look at why it is that there's so much more attention on Seattle than there is in South King County. And what I found, probably the most salient figure that we found from our Seattle Times analysis, which was looking at police killings from 2016 to 2020, is that there were 43 killings throughout the county, but over half of them, 24 of them were in South King County. So that's 56% of it. And it's not that there's more people in South King County, and so because of that, there are just more police killings there. There's actually only a third of the population in South King County, so it's really a disproportionate rate of killings are happening in these areas.
Right. And what are one of the things I noticed in the article is you talked about how the Seattle Police Department, although it gets more attention, it's under the consent decree, there's a lot of eyes on it and everything else. What kind of oversight are you finding out there in these police departments in the suburb, and how does that play into maybe the culture of policing in the different agencies?
Unfortunately, there are not nearly as many oversight mechanisms in South King County as there is in Seattle, because Seattle has been under a federal consent decree since 2012. So we found that in a lot of the smaller cities that police cameras aren't required for the police officers. And we also found that the largest oversight really is police investigating each other. So the Valley Investigative Team is one of the biggest groups that is looking at these police killings. So since it was started a few years ago, they've looked into 50 killings throughout South King County, and the people who are involved in this are all different police departments. And they basically created this group to create some structure and some protocol, because outside police organizations were already investigating each other, and they wanted to have some more structure for this. So the Valley Investigative Team is one oversight that they have down there. Then they also have the inquest process, but unfortunately, the inquest process has currently been stalled because of lawsuits against it. So currently, there's not as much oversight for police as a lot of the impacted families would like.
Right. And now South King County is basically where the biggest poor people below the poverty line and I would say marginalized communities are. It's also home to a shifting demographic, people that have been moved out of Seattle, displaced from the city limits out to South King County. Um, do you see or have you heard of police departments doing anything as far in regards to training and becoming familiar with this shifting demographic that's in these cities? You know, when I was in high school, it was like I didn't know anybody who lived in Auburn or Puyallup that looked like me. And now there's so many black people in places like Auburn, Puyallup, Kent, and Federal Way. Where does one police training and even interaction between police departments and community come into play?
This was a concern that some of the activists and the impacted family that I spoke with talked about. They said that there's been a lot of displacement from Seattle, and a lot of marginalized people are moving to the South. But the police are just not trained to properly be able to meet and properly police over marginalized communities, and sometimes using use of force a little bit sooner than they should, or using more extreme use of force than maybe they should for vulnerable communities. One person who I spoke with, Rose Davis, who is the sister of Renee Davis, who was killed by the Auburn police on the Muckleshoot Reservation back in, I believe it was 2016. So she told me that one of her concerns that she has is that police officers who are policing over the Muckleshoot tribe, they don't have an understanding of trauma that Indigenous people experience. And if they did have more of an understanding of intergenerational trauma, that maybe they would police differently than they do. If they recognized the people who they're policing over and tried to become more of the community, then they would maybe think twice before reaching for their gun. So there is some efforts recently to try to get more training and cultural sensitivity training in particular for the South King County Police Departments. So Representative Tina Orwell is currently she started a couple of work groups that's trying to bring some training for mental health for police officers in the South, and then also to create like a mentorship and internship program for people who are training to be police officers, so that they would have a community leader who they're in touch with as they're going through their training, so that they would be really involved in the community and understand it before they go out there and police.
Right. I know that the actual culture of policing is something that people have been looking at as of late. We talk about the Auburn Police Department, for example, and Officer Nilsen there, who's actually facing charges now for the murder of Jesse Saray. That's the third person that Officer Nilsen had killed. But years ago, there was a federal public defender that submitted a report talking about Officer Nilsen. Like there was like flags that had gone into the Auburn Police Department, but they were saying that the culture there in the police department was such that either these flags were ignored or not seen. How much do you think that the actual culture inside of the police department? So there's the culture of interacting with the people and trying to know the people they police better. But do you think that there needs to be a change in culture internally in some of these police departments?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's what I found in my reporting is that the policies that these police departments have is oftentimes the what ends up exacerbating this excessive use of force. So I spoke with a New York-based nonprofit law enforcement strategy for Center for Policing Equity, and so when I spoke with them, they talked about how there's not as much oversight in suburban cities, and oftentimes the greatest oversight that you do see is policing each other, which is they don't believe that it's the most effective way of really holding police accountable, and also. It seems like what is more important than anything else than oversight mechanisms is having civilians being able to watch them, and someone who's completely outside of law enforcement, and also having policies and a culture that does not allow for this unacceptable behavior from police.
Right. And last question for you. You're a member of the media. I'm a member of the media. This is a valid concern that your article covers, that, these things are happening there in South King County, but they're not really getting a lot of attention. Why do you think that is so?
So, unfortunately, I think that South King County has been ignored for a long time. Part of the reason why my position was created was so that we could shine a light on the lack of coverage or shine a light on issues that haven't received a lot of coverage. I think also because there are so many people who are moving there who have been displaced. Maybe media hasn't caught up on it yet, but it does seem like media isn't as focused on South King County as maybe it could or should be. When I spoke with some activists, they talked about how there was no media at the couple of protests that had happened over the summer in Auburn and Kent. So it definitely seems like it has been ignored.
All right. Melissa Hellman, reporter from the Seattle Times. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.